Thank you for joining the City of Kingston's Common Council Public Safety General Government Meeting. Today is Wednesday, July 2nd. My name is Andrea Schott, the Council President and organizer of virtual meetings. Before we begin, we would like to go over a few guidelines to help us navigate this system as efficiently and respectfully as possible. We ask that members of the public and press remain muted and off camera for the length of the meeting. As organizer, I reserve the right to mute anyone who unmutes themselves. Council members and city staff will control their own mute button. Good practice would be to mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid background noise and feedback. If a council member or staff wishes to speak, they will raise their hands. The chairperson will call on them before they speak by stating their name clearly for our audio listeners. All of our meetings are recorded. Both video and written transcriptions will be made available to the public on the city's website. Although we will not have public speaking tonight, you can submit comments to the City of Clerk Elisa Tinty at emtinty@kingston-ny.gov or by dropping them off at the drop box located outside the side door. I encourage you to reach out to committee chairs or your ward's representative at any time. If you have any audio issues, send a text message to the following number, 845-594-120. Please be aware that phone calls will not be answered during the meeting. The number to text is 845-594-6120. As the organizer for today's meeting, I reserve the right to lock and pause the meeting to eject anyone who has behaved inappropriately. Lastly, at tonight's meeting, we have in attendance Chair Alderman Tony Davis, committee members Alderwoman Michelle Hirsch, Alderman Jeffrey Ventura Morel, Alderman Rennie Scott Childress, Alderman Patrick O'Reilly, non-voting council member Alderwoman Rita Worthington. City staff, we have Corp Counsel Dan Gardenstein, City Engineer John Schulteis, and City Clerk Elisa Tinty. Thank you for your patience during these difficult times, and on behalf of the Common Council, I wish you and your family good health. I now turn the floor over to Chairman Davis.
Hello, everybody. Like I said in my Facebook, it doesn't cost anything to say hi. Hi. Well, hello. So the first thing on our agenda is the Conservation Advisory Council update. Is someone here to?
I'm gonna unmute all others, and if there's somebody here from the Conservation Advisory Council, speak now. Well, give me a second. Is there somebody from the Conservation Advisory Council here? Anyone from the Conservation Advisory Council?
Sounds like caller 2 is trying to respond.
I think it's his background noise. Anybody from the Conservation Advisory Council on the phone listening?
Doesn't sound like it, Andrea.
Doesn't sound like it, Tony.
All right, so we'll skip that for this month. Hopefully we'll get an update at next month's meeting. So we're going to go to new business. On the agenda is 2A Wilbur Avenue at Dunn Street signage. And I guess President Shaw is a request that Alderman Tollerman. The Alderman requests to eliminate the stop sign for vehicles that are southbound on Wilbur at Dunn. This is not a standard intersection with multiple streets coming together. At one point, Dunn, Davis, Wilbur, and Rodney. My recommendations are follows. If City Engineer John Schulteis could weigh in on this, I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, this is John Schulteis. I visited the site and agree that we could do make a change here that would improve things, even though it is a non-standard intersection, to give people a little better predictable movement of traffic here, especially for people who aren't familiar with it. And so we would remove the stop sign for Wilbur at Dunn southbound and add some stop signs that are not currently in the code, 2 of which are installed, even though they're not legislated, and 2 more that are not yet legislated. So all that's detailed in my notes there, Tony. I don't know if you want me to read it in more detail.
No, I can read it. So I'll read the proposal. Revise it in Code Chapter 390, Vehicle and Traffic as follows. Remove from 390-92 Schedule 9 stop intersections, Wilbur at Dunn southbound, and add to 390-92 Schedule 9 stop intersections, Dunn at a Bill, note sign is installed but not in the code. Davis at Wilbur, note sign is installed but not in the code. Rodney at Dunn, and Wilbur northbound at Davis. So those are the recommendations from the city engineering department to remove some signage, but then add some more signage. I don't know whose ward this is off the top of my head. All the women Hirsch.
Yes, this is my ward, and I didn't know about this request, and I'm just curious when this request went in.
Well, it looks like it was from Alderman Tollerman. So is it his ward or your ward? But at the request of Alderman Tollerman, evaluate this. Say that again?
It's Ward 9.
Okay. So it says evaluate the discretion removal of the stop sign for southbound traffic at this location. So I'm not sure if someone approached Alderman Tollerman in regard to this and he submitted it to the city engineers department. But it is Alderwoman Hirsch. It's in your ward?
Correct. And if I may address John through the chair, John, I was actually getting just recently requests to put in a crosswalk at the bottom of Wilbur and Dunn.
Okay.
Because people aren't using the stop sign. So.
Where would the crosswalk crossing Wilbur?
Yes. Going over into that little pocket park, but then we don't have sidewalks there.
Well, it is. We have a few locations around the city where there's a crosswalk striped, even though there's not a sidewalk to go to. It's not the best practice. I do know as part of the upcoming Wilbur project, we're going to get at least one curb ramp installed, but that's a couple years away. Well, maybe more like 1 year away to have that done. So in the short term, I can look at it again. I don't think there's a heavy volume of pedestrian traffic in that area. But we may get a crosswalk striped when it makes more sense to do so.
Alderwoman Hirsch.
I'm sorry, it's pouring and it's loud. I don't know.
I'm sorry. Were you saying?
I don't know if you can hear me because of the rain. It's like hitting my ear.
Can you hear me?
I can make a motion to table this for now and just have more time to look at it and talk to the engineer and then regarding this.
Alrighty, so you're making a motion to table it? Is it a second? Second by Patrick O'Reilly.
I don't think you need a motion to table.
Huh?
I don't think you need a motion to table because we haven't.
All right, I don't.
Made a motion to pass it yet. We just put it on to old business.
All right. So so anybody against tabling it? All right, so we'll table this into next month and Alderwoman Hirsch can bring us back some more information, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next thing on the agenda is the removal. Oh, I'm getting old. Removal of 11 traffic signals, various locations throughout the city of Kingston. And does anyone, you all had this information. Do you want me to read every Chairwoman, should I read everyone?
Read it for, yeah, I mean, I would do that for the public.
Okay, so I will read every one of the intersections. So as a proposal, a project has been underway. This is Alderman Tony Davis, I'm sorry. A project has been underway since 2018 to study traffic signals at the following locations: Washington Avenue at Linderman Avenue, Washington Avenue at Pearl Street, Washington Avenue at Main Street, Wall Street at Pearl Street, Fair Street at Pearl Street, Clinton Avenue at St. James Street, Clinton Avenue at Franklin Street, Clinton Avenue at Henry Street, Fair Street at St. James Street, Foxwell Avenue at Grand Street and Shutefeld Street, and East Chester Street at Lincoln Street. So those 11 proposals. Based on the conclusion of the engineering report prepared by Craig and Manning dated March 31st, 2020, the signals at these 11 locations do not meet the warrants for signalization, and the signals can be removed and replaced with all-way stop conditions in each case. A copy of the report is available in my office and on the website of the Ulster County Transportation Council at the following link, which is ulstercountynewyork.gov transportation-council/active studies/Kingston-traffic signals. It is my recommendation that these signal removal be implemented as per the recommendation of the report. You want me to read any more? So there's a recommendation from the city engineers department to remove those 11 tracking signals and install, John, help me out if I'm saying it wrong. Install all-way stop signs, right?
That's right, Tony. At each of the 11 locations. So, and I can discuss this in a little more detail. I know last year, around October, November of last year, there was a public hearing on this, or a public meeting on this matter, actually conducted by Ulster County, and we did solicit input, and we came and spoke with the Public Safety Committee. I want to say in November of last year. So at that time, the composition of the committee was different, had some different members at that time. So some of you are probably maybe seeing this for the first time now. Others have been involved with it, for a year and a half now. But it was an extensive study that involved checking each of 8 warrants at all of these locations. And a warrant is an engineering condition that would either be a volume of traffic in a peak hour, or a volume of traffic over a 3-hour period, or a crash history at a particular intersection. And when we look at signalization, in order to justify the signal, the location has to meet those warrants. At least one warrant to justify converting it. If we were going from a stop sign condition to signalization, we'd have to show that it met the warrants. So to do the reverse of that, in this case, to remove unwarranted signals, each one was checked against those 8 conditions, and none of these locations met any of the warrants. So that tells us that the signals are not warranted, and really from a traffic engineering point of view and a financial point of view should be removed and replaced. It's also worth noting about half of these locations are already functioning on a flashing red condition. They're not functioning as 3-color signals, and in many cases haven't been for several years. And so it's already, that period of time when they're not functioning correctly has served as a test case as well. And we find that they have capacity as an all-way stop. So that's the recommendation at these 11 locations.
On the question, Alderman Patrick O'Reilly.
I just want to thank John Schultes, our engineer, for, trying to improve the flow of traffic in our city, making it safer for everyone. Truly appreciate that, John. Kingston, it feels, when you're in your car, it feels like you're stopping and going all the time. Maybe next you can take a look at some of these stop signs. I'm sure the brake shops around town love all these stop signs, but many of them seem unnecessary. And maybe you could start with Rennie's neighborhood first. Terrible amount of stop signs. I don't know what alderman was in that neighborhood before you, Rennie, but they put up stop signs all over the place. Main Street is could be a nice starting place. And I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
Alderman Scott Childress.
Hi, Rennie Scott Childress here. Thanks for that, Pat. There used to be a stop sign salesman who lived around the corner on Pearl Street. So, John, I got several questions. So first off, can you give us an estimate of what the cost savings would be if we take out these 11 traffic lights?
Well, if we were maintaining them, in a working condition, which already half of them were really not, there would be more savings. Of course, there's an electric meter account at each one of these. I don't, the usage is not real high, but I think you pay about $11 a month just to have that electric meter at each location, plus any electrical usage. And then you have the cost of the city electrician routinely changing bulbs, for those ones that are changing, and even the flashing reds, I guess, need bulbs from time to time. I don't have that number, but I will say, in addition, all of these utilize obsolete technology. And speaking with the people, the DPW electrician, DPW superintendent, they've both indicated that finding the spare parts for these is becoming impossible. And so there's that cost savings as well. But again, it's a lot of these have been functioning on a Band-Aid basis for a number of years.
So if we were to, do you have a ballpark figure for what it would cost to replace a traffic light?
Oh, a brand new one?
Yeah.
They're on the order of $200,000 per intersection.
We can afford that, can't we? No. Okay. Well, so that helps, because what we're talking about then is, in one way, by putting in stop signs, we're saving something like $2 million by not buying more traffic signals.
If you were to come to me and say, hey, let's modernize these and get the latest digital controllers and pedestrian heads and push buttons, the first thing we'd do is this analysis to say, hey, is the signal still warranted? And we already know the answer is no.
Okay, and I remember when we talked about this before, and help me, I thought one of the things that would happen is, especially on Washington, if you take out the traffic signals and put in stop signs, there was also going to be some road construction to decrease the width at those intersections so that it would help cars to slow down. It would also reduce the distance that pedestrians would have to cross the street.
Those locations on Washington specifically were originally one of about 12 or 14 locations that we were going to propose under the city's PSAP grant. That's an acronym for Pedestrian Safety Action Plan.
Uh-huh.
It's a grant administered by the DOT. Unfortunately, the funding under that was not sufficient to do all of the 12 or 14 intersections that were originally contemplated. And so the number of intersections is now down to about 4 or 5. I don't have it in front of me, but I believe the ones on Washington were cut in favor of some other locations that had a higher benefit or lower cost to utilize those grant funds.
Well, that's going to be a problem because that intersection at Linderman and Washington, that's a heavily trafficked intersection by children walking to school. So I don't see leaving that intersection like it is. When when we first went back to stop signs there after the sinkhole was fixed, I sat there and one day for 30 minutes, and on the one hand, I was very impressed. A lot of people slowed down. Most of them came to an actual stop. But then just as I was about to leave, this one car just rolled right through that intersection. If you got children crossing that street when something like that happens, that's hell to pay.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
So Rennie, I'm sorry, excuse me, my computer's been messing up lately. So Rennie, are you recommending not removing that signature at Linderman and Washington? I couldn't hear. I'm sorry.
I'm okay with the removal of the traffic signal, I think, but my approval was contingent on this, reducing the width of the street so that pedestrians would have a shorter distance to cross there. And, my main concern at that intersection is there's a lot of kids who walk through there. And, if you're going to take out a traffic light, you got to make sure that there's extra protection for the kids who are going over to George Washington School.
So John, I didn't hear your response to that. Is it so I understand what Rennie's saying. Maybe it doesn't appear that all these intersections are by schools. It does appear that that's Washington Avenue and Linderman Avenue is near a school where children are going to be, hopefully we get back into the schools walking. And is it maybe something that we should hold on to where they can have a stop sign where they can, or traffic signal where they can cross, until the city can figure out how better to configure that we don't need a traffic signal? And Patrick O'Reilly, Mr. Alderman O'Reilly, I see you. I will get to you next.
You want me to respond to Rennie's comments?
Yeah. Thank you.
You want me to respond to Rennie's comments?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you with Rennie's comments, and the list of 12 intersections really, that was pared down for funding reasons. We can revisit that at any time, and to the extent that the council wants to authorize spending on these kinds of matters, directly outside of a DOT or a grant project.
So, Alderman O'Reilly.
Yeah, hi, Alderman O'Reilly. I believe there's a crossing guard at the backside on Washington Avenue before school and after school. I hope there is. Maybe we can, coordinate with the school system, make sure that there's a crossing guard there every day, in the morning, in the afternoon, so that those children who live in that neighborhood do not have to cross Washington Avenue at all without a crossing guard. I think that would solve some of the problem. It seems like we could do some kind of during school hours maybe, or during the school year, until we get the money or funding. I mean, we're going to be doing this a lot, guys. We're going to have to do some kind of makeshift, maybe not permanent, maybe cheaper solutions like cones or some kind of barrier, cheaper barrier until, Rennie, we can get, a permanent structure in there. It seems like we should be able to figure this out, combined with the school system. It should work, and surely maybe that would be a good avenue to go.
Alderman Scott Childress.
Hi, Alderman Scott Childress here again. John, if you could, if it's not too much trouble, if you could work up an estimate of, what it would cost, because I was a little unclear. Are you saying we would need to fund a study first, or that we could just talk about the potential of using one of the 4 intersection budgets for the Washington and Linderman as opposed to one of the other spots?
Well, as far as the grant, the PSAP grant, those are moving to final design, and we really, I wouldn't recommend trying to change which intersections were selected at this time. But that funding had so many constraints with it that, for example, it would pay for a crosswalk but not a sidewalk. It was very. The way DOT had set up that funding is very limiting. Whereas if the Common Council, I have those numbers already, I think, for the 12 or 14. So that's easy to come up with. If the Common Council wants to authorize that, spending at some high priority intersections, that work can proceed. Really, the design is minimal. And some amount of it can probably be done by our own DPW. Some amount might need to be contracted, depending on the exact types of improvements. With a curb bump out, those are very useful. But sometimes they have you end up having to move a drainage inlet from its current location to another. That adds cost. But anything's possible.
Is this something that we can ask you to do now, or do we need to go through some more official channel to get that to happen?
I'll take the direction now. If
Okay. Yeah, just to give us an estimate, a sense of what we're talking about in terms of cost and
I think we had this long list of intersections, and it was we had hoped the money was going to go farther, and then with the DOT spending requirements and bidding and everything that you have to do, as a DOT sponsored local aid project, the money was not going very far. So we had to trim a number of intersections.
I understand. It's just that one intersection, because we already had parents complaining about the intersection where there is a crossing guard, the one that's there at Marius and Washington, right in front of the school. So it just would seem kind of upside down to now take out a traffic light at this other intersection.
Yeah.
So
I will just add, in the case of the traffic signals, none of these 11 signals has a push button or pedestrian indicator like modern signals would.
Okay.
So it's not like we're losing that feature at any of these 11.
Okay. Thank you.
That's my concern, especially on Washington Avenue, because Alderman Tony Davis here. I'm sorry. Because it's Washington Avenue, Linderman Avenue, Washington Avenue at Pearl, Washington Avenue at Main Street. I'm not sure, I don't live over there. How is that still walking distance for people who are going to George Washington School? And if we're going to do something at Washington and Linderman, I would think that we're going to do this. We should be doing the same thing at those other intersections of Washington Avenue, if they are walking distance, which I'm assuming they are walking distance to George Washington School. They are not catching a bus. And that is a main thoroughfare, with trailways, buses, with lots of traffic, that if we're going to do something at one intersection, we need to make sure we're doing it at those other 2 intersections for there. So that is just my concern. Alderman O'Reilly.
Tony Alderman, I believe it's a half a mile that is the distance that a walker would have to walk at elementary school.
Okay. So I'm not sure if that's a half a mile or not. But my concern is if we're going to do something in Linderman, in the other 2 intersections of Washington Avenue, or in that mile or half a mile, whatever it might be, that we got to do the same thing, because they're going to have to cross that intersection to get to the school. So I've been freezing in and out. I'm not sure if it was some other proposal. Alderman O'Reilly.
And Tony and Rennie, just to ease your mind a little bit, I think kindergartners do, that doesn't apply to them. I think they get picked up by a bus.
Okay.
I can check on that for you.
So is there motion to pass this, or are we, again, I've been freezing a lot, so I apologize, and to table this again, or is there a motion to pass this?
I would be, and this is Rennie Scott Childers, I would be more satisfied if there's no particular rush with this to get those numbers from John so we can see what kind of cost we might be talking about for at least one intersection there. Just so we have a clear idea, because at this point, I don't feel like I could, in good conscience, vote for this without an improvement of that one intersection. Although, I mean, we're in this COVID craziness, so it's not clear that people are going to be actually going to school in the first place. So we may have some extra time there. But, that's my main concern, is that one intersection.
And Alderman O'Reilly?
John, how would that affect the other? How would this affect the other that's work going through? Would it stop completely right now? All the work except for this? Or what I'm saying is, could we just stop on this one intersection, or do we have to, would it cancel everything?
Well, the only each of these can stand alone as a project, as a removal. I think that makes a lot of sense if we're talking about Washington Avenue to do all three at once, because it's going to be one learning process for drivers rather than one relearning now and one 3 months from now and one 3 months. You're going to change the traffic pattern. I would suggest doing it only once.
Makes sense.
On the corridor.
All right. So is there any more questions on this? So are we saying we should table this until John gets us more information, or should we modify this or revise this, that the Washington Avenue extensions are taken off? And my only concern is that you're going to have parents, again, I believe Clinton Avenue is a walking distance to George Washington School. If I'm right, I mean, I haven't ran a half a mile in a long time, but I think that's inside of a half a mile. So my concern is that if we can do a study on that as well, if they're working Clinton Avenue, St. James, but I mean, that's my concern. That's my only concern, is that if we're going to look at Washington Avenue, we should look at all of them that might be in potential of walking distance, if we're concerned about, Washington Avenue and student and children walking there. And this table it until John can get back to us with more information. Alderman O'Reilly?
Yeah, there was a Safe Schools grant where they looked at all of these problems for kids getting to and from school. John, was that included, or did you look at that, or do you know about that Safe Schools grant?
Yeah, right. The Safe Routes to School was a couple or 3 years ago. It was before I got here. It created the signal, upgraded the one Delaware at Murray, and it created a few other crosswalks and things like that around the city. I don't have the complete list of all the locations, but a lot of times those grants, when you're looking at the grant, you identify 8 locations, and then you find out the funding is sufficient for 3. So, but I'd have to look at the history of the Washington at Linderman or Pearl relative to those. I don't think they've ever been part of a grant as a construction. They might have been proposed initially as part of an application, and then later some other higher priority got the funding.
I know they did study all the routes that the kids are taking to school. So there may be a study out there on that corner.
Yeah, I'll check.
I mean, I think our concern, I can only speak for myself. My concern is that the children who are walking, and again, I apologize for my computer breaking in and out. And I think that's what Alderman Scott Childress was referring to in regard to Washington Avenue. I could be wrong in regard to children walking there and it just be a stop sign and people are not adhering to it. And, in my ward here is at Foxwell, Grand, and Shuteville. Yes, could it be proposal of a stop sign at each location instead of that light? That again, that's a walking distance for people who are going to the high school. And if we're going to study Washington Avenue or look into Washington Avenue, I think we should look into that intersection too, and this whole thing to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that the children who are walking to schools are going to be safe.
Yes, thanks. Alderman Scott Childress here. Yeah. So, I heard what John was saying about doing all the changes at once. We did decide to do something different at Linderman in Washington. I think the intersection, most
I'm sorry, Rennie.
walking.
Never mind. Yeah, Patrick, there's feedback when you're not talking on that.
Yeah, he had to move into the laundry room in his house, it sounds like. So the most of the kids who walk to George Washington School from this side of Washington, they're not going to walk and cross Washington except at that Linderman or at the Marius crosswalks there. So the other spots I think are not as much of a problem in terms of thinking about kids walking to school, because you're going to walk back routes mostly to get over to Linderman or Marius. So that's my concern there. I'm done.
John, how far does that new sidewalk go on that side of Linderman where Rennie's concerned that the kids are going to have to cross over to George Washington? On the side where they'd be crossing, which is the side where the pizza place is, how far does that brand new sidewalk go?
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking.
From Linderman, heading towards the George Washington School, there's a pizza place on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
There's a new sidewalk in there, brand new, correct? From the sinkhole? Repairs?
I believe sidewalk on both sides.
Yeah.
There's sidewalks on both sides, is that correct?
I believe.
Yeah.
And some of them are brand new, correct?
Yeah, but it would have replaced an older sidewalk.
Yes. When they did Washington Avenue over.
I was just wondering how far that brand new sidewalk goes. And because I know sometimes children will walk on the nicer sidewalk or anyone would. And is that a brand new sidewalk on that side of the street?
I don't have that information in front of me.
Okay, thank you.
It doesn't stretch down that far, Patrick. I see your thing. There, Rennie Scott Childress here. I see what you're saying, but that new sidewalk, it doesn't go all the way down to Linderman. It's mostly in the area where the sinkhole was and all the related construction.
My Alderman Tony Davis here and chair, and I don't know. My feeling is before we go ahead with this, if we want to get feedback from anybody who's listening now or parents in that neighborhood, before we just remove these signals and put stop signs, because I know it's going to be concerned if and when, or when and if we get back into school, and about children walking there. And for the most part, this is not in my neighborhood, and where I can basically go out inside of my house and look. And they're going to be the people who are walking their children to school, and they're going to be able to give us more feedback in regard to, yes, you can remove the stop sign or the traffic signal here, but you shouldn't remove it here. And that's what my logic is here. And anybody else can feed back in better. That's what my logic is. Engineer John Schulteis, City Engineer John Schulteis.
Just to comment on that, we did hold a public process. This was an advertised public meeting that was held at the Restorative Justice Center last October. There was some attendance. There was a public comment period. All of those public comments are available to read within the report itself. And none of them particularly said this is making it less safe for pedestrians. If a pedestrian feels safer today than they would with the four-way stop, I can tell you it's a bit of a false sense of security that they have today. There are no pedestrian push buttons. There's no countdown timer or anything like that we have on our more modern signals. And as a pedestrian at these locations now, you just have to look for that green going in the same direction with you, and that's your signal to walk. Whereas at a four-way stop, we know in Kingston, not everybody observes stop signs perfectly. They don't come to full stops, but at least 98% do slow down. And that gives a pedestrian stepping into that crosswalk at least a fighting chance, rather than somebody right now who can time it right on Washington Avenue and they're cruising through at 30 miles an hour through green lights. So that situation will be eliminated with the four-way stops.
Chairwoman and Andrea Shout.
Hi, to go along with that, John, because I remember talking about this in all the public meetings. I mean, do cars speed more if they see lights because they want to get through them versus the stop signs? So it actually could reduce the speed that's happening there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's definitely a phenomenon. And you see it where, I see yellow and I can get through and I know it's going to turn red, but it'll only be red for 2 seconds. So I'm going for it. That happens in Kingston and everywhere. That's human nature.
And this is Alderman Tony Davis, and then I'll go to Alderman O'Reilly. I didn't know about this study. It might have been before I was the chair of this committee and on this committee. So I appreciate you, Engineer John Schulteis, and letting me know about that. So was a study or was a discussion in the community had input into this, and you didn't see any resistance to doing these changes, I should say?
Well, if there are comments in there opposed to this, not from engineers, from residents who anecdotally feel that people respect a traffic signal more than a stop sign. That's not an engineering consideration. There's not evidence for that. People can run a stop sign. People can run a red light. You're not going to eliminate that. Nothing we do will. But one of the overarching goals of this is to use the right traffic control devices in the right place. So, it's frustrating to pull up to a four-way stop and there's never any cross traffic. So in those locations, we're trying to convert those to a two-way stop where the sight distance allows. None of these do. So it's frustrating to pull up to a red a red light, and there's not enough traffic volume crossing to warrant. It's like, why do I have to, why do I have to sit here for 15, 20, 30 seconds and wait for a green light when nobody's coming? So
Alrighty.
They're trying to eliminate some of those.
Thank you. Alderman O'Reilly?
We have to remember now, if the lights are green and I travel on Washington Avenue a lot the whole way down, you can get going pretty fast through there. Now you're going to have to stop at almost every intersection, which is going to slow the traffic down somewhat. It sounds like our engineer has done his due diligence on this. Sounds like we've had public meetings on this. Sounds like he's ready to go. I'm willing to make a motion to allow this entire project to happen. Motion.
Do I have a second? So the motion is to pass the resolution, and as the city engineer has indicated with these 11 intersections. Is there a second? Alderwoman Hirsch is second. All in favor? Opposed? So that goes 1, 2, 3, 4 favor, 1 opposed, and the opposed is Alderman Scott Childress. Okay. Chairwoman Shout.
John, can you, because this will go to, we have an extra week the way the month lines up. So can you look at that one intersection before caucus that Rennie was talking about, the one at Washington Avenue and Lindemann, to see how much that would cost to get that fixed up?
Absolutely.
All right,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Yes.
I apologize. I lost my email here, so I don't know what's next on. I don't know what's next on the agenda.
It's traffic calming stop signs at South Wall and Brook Street. Remove them. That's the.
Remove them. And any comment on that? City Engineer John Schulteis.
Yeah, I visited this location. We use four-way stops where there's not sufficient sight distance for all of the movements, and due to the terrain and the curvature on Brook Street, there's not sufficient sight distance here. So I think historically that's why this is a four-way stop, and my recommendation is to leave it unchanged.
Anybody on the question about unchanged? Any discussion? So the resolutions, and again, I apologize.
Tony, if you don't want to make a change, you don't need a resolution.
Alrighty.
The resolution would only be if it wants to make a change.
So it would stay as it is.
Yep. No action by the committee unless somebody wants to make a motion and remove them. It's just John is giving recommendation. The committee can.
Anybody have a motion to that they want to remove them? Okay. Nobody's in favor of removing them, and so what will we do? Do we have to do anything with that resolution?
No.
Or not resolution, but communication?
Nope, it's done.
All right. Somebody read me the next resolution, please.
It's the parking at 97 St. James Street. I believe this is the 2-hour parking in Rita's ward.
Correct. So it's all the women Worthington.
Hi, thank you. Rita Worthington here. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure though that that the amended request was sent in. It initially was initially was having 2 parking spaces for the business, but then we amended it to do 2-hour parking. So everybody has that, yes?
Yes, I received that communication, and the rest of the committee might not have gotten that because it originally was to the loading dock. And
Right. Right.
I know I received communication from you that it was to revise it to this be 2-hour parking.
Correct.
Does anybody have a question on that? So, although Chairwoman Chow, I'm not sure if you had the updated communication.
I don't. I mean, I was copied on a lot of those emails, but the communication that was sent and it was still in the file, the old one. But you could just have the resolution say, and that would be fine.
City Clerk, Lisa Tanky, do you have an updated version?
Somebody, you might need to turn your call on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think there's feedback. Yeah.
City Clerk, Lisa Tanky, do you have an updated version, or do I have to create a new committee report?
I do not have an updated version.
So I would have to write this and then send it to you.
Yeah, I'm going in and out, so I can barely hear you.
We could, Tony, as long as if this is what the committee wants to do, we could get the committee report. Either Lisa could send it to me, or you could send it to me.
Okay.
To get the pictures. So
If you could just
Tony,
email me
if I
the
may.
exact wording.
yes, Lisa, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Worthington?
And if you would like, I can also just email the updated communication to you, and you can attach it to the committee report.
No, that's okay. I'll just write one up here right now. So the committee report should read and to install or add and 2-hour parking in front of 97 St. James Street.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Anybody on the question? Nope, nobody in the question. All in favor? Show of hands. Thumbs, I should say. Anybody opposed? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, and 0 against installing and 2-hour parking in front of 97 St. James Street.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry. Who made the motion?
Oh, did I do a motion? Motion,
Aye.
Jeffrey Ventura Morel, second. Patrick
Yes.
O'Reilly. Sorry. All in favor? Opposed? All right.
Excuse me, this is Alicia.
So,
Excuse me.
Jeffrey first, motion, Patrick O'Reilly second. All in favor was 5-0.
Tony, Elisa is trying to speak.
Alisa?
Sorry. So Rita, please send that email to me. I will need that communication for backup of the resolution.
I'll definitely get that to you.
Thank you.
You're
All right.
welcome.
Thank you. The next thing on new business is we're going to hear from Police Chief Tinty to discuss safety issues in the city of Kingston. Is the chief here?
Yes, I'm on.
Hey, Chief.
How you doing there, Tony?
Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
And the committee, I received a lot of several phone calls and emails and for constituents and residents of the city of Kingston in regard to the recent violence that's been going on in the city of Kingston and what's going on and what can they do to help with the community. So I invited the chief to come on and discuss what's going on as much as he can and what can the city of Kingston residents do to make this community safe. Thanks, Chief, for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So as I've said in the paper before, you've read, this is unprecedented. We've never had this much violence occur in such a short amount of time. And there are a number of factors, as pointed out in the numerous articles. This is not one thing that's going on. It's not one group. We have information that's we're putting together based upon the homicides that occurred and the shootings that have occurred. And we have now reached out to other agencies to give us a hand. The state police and the sheriff. If you check with the residents, or maybe you've seen them yourself, we have increased the number of visible patrols out there, both at the state level and at the county level. A lot of it is out there for information gathering. Some of it is out there to put to help settle some of the nerves of the residents. We understand that because this is completely unprecedented, a lot of people do not feel safe in the neighborhoods. It's completely understandable. As I've said, I've been a cop for Kingston since 1992, and I've never seen it like this either. So there are a number of factors that are contributing to this. So you mentioned about what the residents can do to help. One of the things we've run into is that there is a hesitation in some of the residents to help or participate or share some of the information they may have involving individuals that they may know or believe to know that are involved in these incidents. So one thing I understand, they're concerned about some sort of retaliation. We encourage the use of the anonymous tip line that we have, the tips off line. They can access that on our page. They can share that information anonymously. There is no way to trace it back. We have recently begun to get some tips that way over the last few days. That's helped. I've had phone calls in my office from individuals. The phone number does not come up. They just say names, and I've shared that with the investigative members of the department as well. So,
Chief,
yes, go ahead.
Can you state that number that they can call?
Well, they can call my office directly at 943-5766 and speak to me. The tips off line, you can follow the link right on our Facebook page or on our website. That's also the direct, and that'll allow additional information to be input either through your phone, whether it's through a text, whether it's through a computer, tablet, whatever it may be. So we offer a couple of different options for those individuals that are concerned or apprehensive about doing a face-to-face with police officers. Most important, we have come across certain neighborhoods that have either Ring-style cameras or cameras on the front porch that may have recorded something. We encourage people to call us if they have that. A lot of times our neighborhood canvases, people at the time that these events are occurring are very apprehensive about talking to the cops. And we understand that, but we have an investigation and a duty to follow up on that. So if someone wants to contact us later, the detectives and the officers are given the information for contact, whether it's through a business card or word of mouth. And please, I encourage your residents to follow up on that. Even if they believe that the tip is something they heard through the grapevine, it may be something we can act on. It's a very difficult time. And I know there's people out there blaming the bail reform or the civil unrest, or there's a lot going on. There's no doubt about it. Again, unprecedented times. All major cities are going through this, not just Kingston, but Albany and New York, and we are a small section, a subsection of those same cities. So the violence that is occurring in those cities are also occurring to some degree here. But it is, and I think the article in the Times talked about me pleading for some assistance, and that's exactly what I want to do, is make clear that it is a plea. We can't do this on our own. As far as what the council can do, I encourage you to really kind of go out there and speak to your constituents and put their minds at ease that share a mission. Even though there may be some sort of a doubt to whether or not you can trust the police, or there's, what reading paper send you to, whatever, I still encourage that. We are, I mentioned before, right now to help solve these crimes, and until these individuals are put away, and I believe that's really the only way this can stop, is when these individuals to that level of violence that they're displaying and the inherent disregard for the it has to be done through the mechanisms that we have, and then that's through investigations. And part of it is I will be approaching the council on the possibility of introducing the use of certain technologies. Can you hear me? It just blinked out on me. Can you hear me here?
Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit, Chief. So we missed a little bit within that.
Um,
You're making it worse. Go the other way.
hold on.
You still there, Chief?
All right. Yeah, I'm still here. If you can hear me,
Yeah, we
Oh,
can
that's
hear you.
much better. Yes, don't move.
that's better because I just connected to the Wi-Fi. So.
Yeah, we could hear you. You kind of started talking about what the council could do. So, do you mind going back?
Yes. Absolutely. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try to connect. Well, better maybe.
You there, Chief?
Oh, can you hear me again, or did
Yes,
it disconnect?
we can.
There we
Yes.
go. Better.
You're good.
All right. Sorry about that. So one of the things that I'm going to be asking the council for is the use of technology. I think that for us, because we're running into some concerns with the information getting to us, or the ability or the belief that some of the residents don't feel that they can turn to the police at this time. I think that one of the things we have to rely on and has been successful in other jurisdictions is the use of technology. And I think for us, one of the things that has come into play quite successfully in many investigations. Okay, I'm gonna go here.
We got you, Chief.
All right, here we go. Switch off now. All right. How's that? Is that better? Okay. Here we are. That's better. So at this, I'm better with the camera too. This way you can see me. So one of the things I think that's important is to make sure that we recognize that technology now is everywhere, whether it's on our smartphones, whether it's on the cameras that protect our homes or make us feel more secure. And the one thing that we have run into from the investigative component is that technology. I can't tell you the number of search warrants that have been filed with the court and how many search warrant returns we've gone through and how much information is being gathered. When I tell you thousands and thousands of pages. So the technology is there. So things that we need on the investigative end, unfortunately, are going to cost money. And I'm going to ask the council for that support financially to get that money. One thing that has come into play for us is the use of license plate readers. We have a few throughout the city. We have one on a mobile unit as well. And I think the license plate reader technology is something that we could definitely use. These events that are occurring are normally our information that's coming back to us are done in a vehicle, or that the subjects are being moved around in a vehicle. And I think it's important to have at least some sort of a tracking of those vehicles within the city when these crimes occur. I know there's some concerns out there, both from the ACLU and the NYCLU, that license plate readers invade privacy. But I can tell you that they are a tremendous investigative tool for us when it comes to the public safety. And there always has been that concern about balancing public safety and the freedoms that people enjoy. And it's a very difficult balance to achieve at times. But when events like this occur, I think we have to, and ultimately the council has to decide what's more important at this time. I think the technology component for the license plate readers and cameras and investigative tools of that nature can't be understated. I really believe that that it's now time to act. And I will put together a proposal. I've reached out for a company now, the same one that we currently use for our license plate readers, to put a proposal together. And hopefully once you look it over, you'll understand that the benefits are there.
Alderman Scott Childress.
Hi, Chief Tinty, Alderman Scott Childress here. As we've talked about police issues here in the recent past, one of the things that I've stressed in different venues is how much training that KPD goes through. And you've detailed how you all do more training here in New York State than most other states, and then Kingston has done more than most other New York State municipalities. And so I'm wondering if you've thought about something of a kind of public relations campaign where you take some of that information and try to make it clear that KPD doesn't operate on the same playing field as a lot of these other departments, and so, because I think to some degree that there's some distrust in the community, but it's because a lot of people are reading the national situation and they're not clear on what all has been happening here at the local level. And so, there's that. There's also, you've talked some about community policing before, and it seems like that this is one of those, I don't know if it's exactly old-fashioned, but it seems to me that that's one of those things that I can understand your interest in the license plate readers, but there's also some real power in just having, KPD officers out there.
I agree with everything you said. I think it's important to have the component. I think I would stack our training over the last few years, over the last 4 years, next to other agents. We far exceed the state standard for training. We go above and beyond what other agencies do, only because we are a municipal environment. Our demographics are different than some jurisdictions, and that requires us to have a better understanding. And I'm not talking about the type of training that is being suggested now. We've done that training. The implicit bias and the racial discrimination awareness, and we have gone through that as an agency. We have state level instructors within our own ranks here that instruct. We've gone to other places, and the professional policing component. We've done all that, both as an in-service as a separate training. So I think you're right. I think maybe the public doesn't recognize that or see that on and maybe I am remiss in some ways not putting it out there more frequently. As far as the community policing component, we try. And I'll tell you, before COVID occurred, and that is the one thing that really has set us back as a society, as a community, more so than anything else, is our inability or our limitations in interactions. We did the coffee and a cop. We did the walking post. Before COVID hit, we had just set up a staff meeting to kind of push a 15-minute walk in the morning and a 15-minute walk in the afternoon by every officer, mandated 15 minutes out of the car, walking your post area in the morning and in the afternoon of your shift. And I say in the morning, but in the first half and in the second half. Midnight shift might be a little bit different. There's not many people out there walking around, but even then, in the high traffic areas, we want to encourage that. So in that component is really a twofold. One's the community policing aspect of it, and the other part of it is the wellness component for the officers, that they're not driving around in a car, only getting out when the calls occur, or in a stationary position monitoring traffic. It forces them out of that car for a 15-minute walk. And we don't, minimum 15 minutes. In cases where the call volume's not high, they can go out for half an hour. And I think that would lend itself to that community interaction. I think one of the things that we have found is that in addition to the community participating in the policing, and I know that there's this re-envisioning policing task force that has just been set up as per Cuomo's executive order, that too will allow, I think, a better understanding of what Kingston wants from its police force. How do we as a community want the police, or what calls should we respond to? Right. And I know there's a lot of information out there. I'm very honored to be part of that process, because I think there's going to be a lot of input from the police side of things. I think, as you mentioned, the public may be not aware of the trainings that we've had, or how well trained our officers are and how professional they remain. And we were ahead of a lot of the things that are being demanded today, things that are demanded by citizens and residents and communities we've done in the past. The body camera, the transparency, the accountability, our rules and regulations being looked over, reviewed, and approved by the state. So we are far and away ahead of a lot of these demands that the communities have now. So, or the things that we're not doing yet that we should be. Yeah, we're going to be doing that. But the majority of them we've taken on. So the technology component will never go away. At some point, eyewitness testimony, what they've seen, always gets called into question in the courts. And today, as some of the criminal justice reforms, people are apprehensive. They know that, a lot of the information has to be turned over immediately, that there are, and I won't say fewer protections, but more open transmitting or allowances of information being shared with the defense at that case, where before the investigation could hold some of that back until the trial. So right or wrong, at this point, some of the things that have been passed at the legislative state level are being blamed for this. And I can tell you that some of the frustrations we have from the law enforcement component is that in the past, there have been individuals that we have, for lack of a better term, locked up on charges and have been able to hold them for a period of time where that no longer occurs. And I'm not talking about the minor offenses. No one has ever supported that, even from the cop perspective, right? We're locking somebody up for having something in their pocket for 2 or 3 days because they can't afford bail. That makes no sense. But certainly on the high-level crimes, the ones that affect the community, that start off as drug sales and then move on to guns and then move on to these acts of violence, I think that those have to be re-examined at the state level. So as far as the resources go, our police force has dwindled. At one point, we were at 81. We're down to 68. There are a lot of things internally that limit our ability to put the officers out. There are training requirements we have to meet. There are, just days off that the officers are entitled to that reduces it down to the minimum manning on the street. But we meet that minimum manning regardless, whether it's an overtime basis or whether it's standard scheduling. But there are always the minimum manning as set as part of the collective bargaining agreement. So, the officers still come to work. They still do their job. They answer their calls. As communities expect more from their police, we meet those expectations. I think that initially, like every change, whether it's wearing the body cameras or introducing yourself with the right to know or any of that, there's always that level of apprehension on the part of the officers. But they've accepted that. They know that that's part of their job. We fully recognize that events like George Floyd, although we don't have that here, thankfully, that our officers are professional, that those events have to be condemned. They just can't occur. There's no excuse for any of that. And we recognize that. So, but let me just go back to the technology part of it. The technology will never go away. It'll increase. We have technology here that we're using that's 5 years old and completely outdated. I'll give you a small example. When we use our undercover officers to go out and do, in some cases, the drug buys, in the past, we've sent them in when cell phones were the norm. All we could give them was a pager. Now, just imagine that, right? You walk in with a pager on your belt. Someone's going to say, he's got to be a cop. That doesn't work, right? So now we have to maintain that. And I say technology. Think about whether or not you have the same phone you had in a year or possibly a year and a half ago, right? The technology changes, the models change. Apple is up to whatever it is now, 11 or 12 that they're doing. So when you send an officer in with an iPhone 6, right, it turns heads. And that's part of the issues that we have. And unfortunately, all of it costs money. That is really what it comes down to. So I'm going to put a proposal together. It's something that certainly we can discuss, but I hope you take a serious look at it. It really is, as some of you have mentioned before in some of the meetings, it's time to reinvest in the community. And this is just a small part of that.
First, all the women Worthington and then all the women Hirsch.
Hi, Rita Worthington here. Hi, Chief. Thank you for showing up and giving us an update on how you guys are handling this. So, you kind of touched on it a little bit about what's going on nationally and what's out there in the public. Rennie suggested maybe, advising the public of some of the trainings that the officers go through. Well, at the same time, I've been reading, what's printed in the paper, about these incidences and this gun violence being targeted. While most of it may be, we do know that it's not all targeted. Some of this is random gun violence. And so I know that the officers and yourself, you find yourself in a precarious situation right now where some neighborhoods right now don't even want the police to come into their neighborhoods. And so, I suppose my question is, and my comment. First, the question is for those demographics that really are not trusting the police to do their job because of incidences that have happened, maybe personally and or nationally. How are those residents, or how is KPD going to do their job anyway? Secondly, comment as far as advising that these incidences are targeted. I think that maybe the narrative has got to be truthful. And so whatever we're putting out there to the public to make them feel safe, they got to be told the truth. We know that it's not all targeted. We know that. And so some of it is, but some of it is random. And so I think that, and I know that you yourself and the mayor, you want to make the public feel safe by saying that the public really has nothing to worry about. But that's a hard thing to tell the public when there's been day after day after day after day gun violence.
So the question, how can we reach out to demographics in the city of Kingston that they either don't trust the police or don't want the police, right? Whether it's a local trust issue or an overall trust of cops, right? So,
correct.
And I'll say it this way, that's where you come in. That's where you have to be the liaison. That's where the council members and the representatives of those areas or those demographics have to step in between, where you can reach out for me. You have my cell, you have my... If community members don't trust me as a police officer, then they can go to you as someone who represents them within those demographics. They can share the information with you, and then you share it with me. And you don't have to tell me where it's coming from. I fully respect and understand the concerns of remaining anonymous in some cases. I do. But at the end of it, I can't do anything unless I have some information. That's, I think, very important. And I have reached out for some members of the community in hope to try to bridge that gap or create some sort of for lack of a better, really a liaison position, that there can be some understanding that we have the best of intentions in solving these issues.
I lost you.
But also,
Rita, it's your feedback on your iPad.
Plus, I know this. Why do I keep doing this?
But also from the other end of it, we fully recognize, so we understand that people are apprehensive. I mentioned that early on, that people don't want to talk to us when we do neighborhood canvases after these events. I recognize that. But there has to be a mechanism. Right now, we encourage the tip line. But the other component of that is to turn to a community member. And I point you out because I know you're well connected to your community. Your ears are to the ground. People come to you. They trust you. And you know that you can turn information over to us without revealing where that information came from. Ultimately, it's our obligation to follow up on the tips, right? That's what we have to do. As far as the second part of it, when you mentioned about a statement about targeted events, I can tell you from the information I know that even there have been the homicides, right? Those were targeted events. These shootings that are taking place, there were people in those locations, in that area, that were targeted. We're not talking about events where people are just driving down the neighborhood, firing off rounds. The individuals and where these rounds. Now, I will not I won't sit here at this office and tell you that those rounds missed the intended target and scattered, right? You saw the pictures. They're out there. They did it in an attempt to hit someone or some people or a group or a house that group was in. But sometimes the rounds miss. One of the events that occurred at Birchwood, those rounds were fired at a group, and some of those rounds spread out to hit apartments on either side. And those are scary events. I try not to sugarcoat. I'm trying not to make it so that the community feels safer. I understand their concerns. I absolutely do. The officers are out there. We're not pulling away from our obligations to protect the community or the residents. You know, every time we have information, we put it out as quickly as possible. Anything we can share, we do. We can't share everything. We cannot compromise the investigation by trying to put information out that could potentially reveal what we have going on to the individuals that are committing these shootings. So I really don't agree that we're trying to soften the blow, so to speak. That's not the case at all. The information that's being given to me, the investigators are telling me that these are targeted individuals, whether or not they occurred in the homicide or where the shootings are occurring. That's what's going on. I will say to you that it is extremely concerning to me that there are individuals in our community that have such an inherent disregard for the public, for the residents, for each other as communities, that they're just opening fire in the afternoon, at night, in the morning, whenever that may be. And I think the only way to really combat this is both from the law enforcement investigative component, from the visibility component to show the residents here, we are here. And two, honestly, I think it has to come from the community. They have to be able to share feelings with either yourselves or us as a PD. And if they feel they can't come to us, then they need to go to you.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I don't mean to come across as if you all are trying to soften the blow. I think that's just the way it's coming across, because that's what we're reading. When we read that it's targeted incidences, it almost comes across as if the public really has nothing to worry about, because it's not you they're looking for, it's a certain person that they're looking for. So maybe just the language needs to be changed. So, but I appreciate you saying that, that I could be their liaison. We got a good relationship. I like it. But for you to say it out loud for our public to hear, I do appreciate that. Thank you.
And Rita, you sat on the police commission. You represent the community, even before all this, before you were on the commission, before you became an alderwoman, you represented the community, right? At the community forums, you had the mic, you ran the show, so to speak. And I think people see that. They see the leader that you are in their community, and they come to you because of that. And I know I'm just glad I have the opportunity within the council to say that, because each of you, to some degree, have an obligation to share information you have that you get, even if it's anonymous, with us. We can help. But thank you.
All right, Tony disappeared, but he had called on Michelle, so.
Hi, Alderwoman Hirsch here. Good to see you, Chief Tinte. Thank you for joining us. I have a question just more about like the random shootings, we all read a lot of rumors, right, about random shootings or gunfire. And I'm just curious how often that actually is happening where it's not targeted, and wondering also if there's technology that we can use that would help you in that. Like, I know that like Newburgh had some kind of technology that you could identify if a shot was fired, like where it was coming from, things like that. If you could speak to that, please.
Correct. So one thing that Newburgh does use, and a number of communities use it, they tie in, so they have camera systems throughout. And without delving into the good and bad of cameras and the privacy concerns with cameras, cameras are effective tools, very effective, right? We're using them right now. So I think like anything else, it is a great investment. It does have a lot of benefit. We currently don't have the workforce to monitor the cameras real time. I know other jurisdictions that they've set up vetted volunteers that will watch the cameras. I think that is a good solution in many cases. And because there are concerns for privacy, they aren't in residential neighborhoods, or if they are on residential streets, they're geared for street traffic. They're not pointed at the houses. And in one location, one neighborhood that I'm aware of, not far from here, but not in the city of Kingston, they do have cameras focused on certain places, but they are able to X out or at least hash out the video that shows any windows or doors. So the shot spotter is the technology you're talking about that actually has the ability through camera systems to pinpoint where the shots are coming from and then turn all the cameras in that direction, hopefully to be able to catch the individuals who are responsible for that from when they leave the scene. As far as the targeted component or the random component to this, I know that in some of the shootings that have occurred, that the shots hit houses on either side or hit houses across the street, or again, but these are targeted houses or targeted neighborhoods that this has occurred. And we have some information that some of the individuals were just that there was a group of individuals targeted, right? So if I live at, 1 in Garrigan Drive, when a vehicle passes and they open fire onto 1 Garrigan Drive, which coincidentally has happened. We have had our police department shot at many, many years ago. That becomes the target, right? That house and the individuals within that house become the target. It doesn't settle nerves. It doesn't make it better. It doesn't, right? Because even as I point out, the Birchwood shooting, the shooting that occurred at Birchwood, is still scary. It is unsettling. At that time, individuals were home. It happened when people were on their couch watching TV, settling with their families, and then the individuals shot. And when they fired into that area, hoping to hit these individuals, but really, it didn't matter if they did or not. They shot and then ran. And so in cases like that, in an area like that, and what I have promoted in, housing developments and so on, is the use of cameras, because then we can catch individuals either approaching or leaving the scene. The next closest without that level of what some people consider a privacy invasion would be the license plate readers. And I think that also lends itself quite well to that. And they're all across the country. LPRs are guaranteed, tried and true technology. We have one on a mobile unit as we drive through the city of Kingston. It has come into to play many, many times, and I think that that's important. We just don't have enough of them, and the ones that we do have help sometimes. But just think about all the different places that someone can drive in the city of Kingston without coming across 1 or 2 of these, and it's a problem. But it costs money, as I mentioned before. This technology costs money, and to keep up with it, right? It's not just to buy a $10,000 camera system that we use for undercover narcotics. It's the $10,000 camera system, and then it's the software update that comes with it. Then it's the maintenance agreement that comes with it. And it's not like these things are sitting in a window somewhere as protected by the weather, right? Cops are putting them, they're in cars, they're moving them on their bodies, they're handing them up to other individuals, and there is a lot of handing off on this. So they take a beating, and we try to get the most rugged, SEAL-tested type of equipment out there, Navy SEAL-tested equipment out there. But the truth of the matter is that it happens. There are devices out there that are built, overbuilt in some cases, and they last. And there's others that are not, almost like single use. But I will be approaching the council with those proposals, and I really hope you give us some consideration.
Thank you.
All right, so I apologize, my computer. So all the women, Hirsch, you had your extra question. My thing back to Chief, and I'm not sure if this is the answer or not. You said you had right now on the force is 68.
Correct.
Officers, and you're in the process now of hiring 2 more officers.
No, so we have 68 with 1 that'll be appointed very shortly. So we'll have the 69 as budgeted. But it is, we meet the minimum staffing. We do have some officers assigned in a proactive capacity. I know that there's been some concern. I've had a few phone calls over the last week about proactive measures that we've taken. We are focusing now on the investigative component. Our special investigations unit works hand in hand with a lot of other investigative units in the area. They do rely heavily on the technology as well. Our patrol force is really the ground or the front line, if you could call them that first respond to these calls, and then ultimately start to do the neighborhood canvas and the information gathering. And then our investigative component, whether it's special investigations or duty detectives, are the ones that go through this information, follow up with it, and then that ultimately leads to more information. And I cannot tell you how many boxes and boxes. We're actually running out of room, believe it or not, we're running out of space in storing this stuff. And a lot of it's electronic, but when you get a search warrant back on an electronic device and it's literally 800 pages of information on these phones, on one phone that you've got to go through, it is tremendous, a tremendous amount of work for our officers. We currently have 3 of them that were assigned as school resource officers, since there's very few school programs underway now as a result of COVID and the summer break. We now have them viewing a lot of the video evidence that we're coming across. as we do these neighborhood canvases. So it's a lot of eyes, and just imagine sitting in front of a screen watching 8 hours of gas station video, trying to find whether or not that video may have some information on it, whether it's a car, an individual, whatever. There's a lot to be done there.
All right. So, and the other thing earlier in your discussion about rings, I mean, I know I installed a ring on my house that cost like $80 or $90, and so those are things that neighbors can do that, if they had the economic means to install a ring, that is something that you can video camera. I mean, I know I've been in Virginia and seen, or my daughter's been in South Carolina and she's seen who's walked up to or walked past our house, our driveway. So those are some of the things that neighbors can do to help out in regard to if they don't want to sit out on the porch and videotape everything that's going on.
So one thing about that, and I agree 100%. I think the technology's out there. The price for most is reasonable, or at least we understand that there's that cost benefit, right? So for Ring cameras at about 100, Nest makes them, Google has them, Blink comes out. There's a bunch of companies out there you can get. One of the things we run into over the last few investigations is that with the Ring cameras, there's this distinct view that it gives, right? Usually if it's on the front door, the front porch, the concerns that people have about sharing that video is it'll be relatively easy to tell where that video came from. And now they're worried about the retaliation component of that.
Yes.
By the city installing the cameras and making them city property, one, we don't have to have consent to get the information, and two, we have access to that 24/7. That's one of the advantages of the city invested camera systems. But there are, with Ring, there are a couple of different options. They have a Ring community. You can sign up for it and actually share your video on these Ring community based upon your neighborhoods. We've done that as well as an agency. Some people do share it. They just had a package off their front porch. Can we, get that? Can we get that your information sent?
That's a Ring going off right now.
Yeah. So that, again, you're talking about the use of technology, and I think that's very important to have that available to us, whether it's at the individual resident level or at the city level. But I really do believe it's time to invest in our technology.
Okay. Because, I've gotten several calls about, over on, my neighborhood on Elmendorf Street and what can we do? And I'm, I just indicate that the police officers, the patrol car is not going to be in that location at all times. And, and it's always come back. Well, I don't want them to know that I'm saying anything, I'm telling on them. And I don't know what else to tell them that they can do. I tell them that you don't have to come out on your porch. You can still peek out the window and get a license plate. If you see something, say something. If there's a car in your neighborhood that hasn't been in your neighborhood frequently, write down the license plate. I'm not sure. Is that something you would suggest?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. It just popped in my head when you started talking about the license plates and stuff. I don't actively promote individuals, and I've had it happen. They see a car going through their neighborhood and they jump out in the middle of the street and snap a picture of it. That's not really a good move, right?
No, that's not good.
Tends to do harm. They're putting themselves in a bad position. So, but certainly discreetly write it down. I'll go so far as, we talked about the tip line. We talked about the ability to go through community leaders and city leaders to share that information with the police. I have received probably 6 in a month, anonymous mailed, like postage letters that were sent to me. No return address, no signature, just information on a sheet of paper that was mailed to me. And you see the Albany postmark on it and it comes back down, but that's also another option. That certainly is, it's a snail mail option, but at least we're getting the information. So as I mentioned before, I think over the last 2 or 3 days, people have recognized that they need to help us. They really do. That's really the only way we can. And so that information has started to trickle in.
Okay. And would you suggest about neighborhood watches again? I mean, we're talking about I'm aging myself, but we're talking about the 80s and, Andrew probably was just a little kid back then, neighborhood watches and stuff like that. Would you recommend those things again of people just getting back in and saying, neighborhood watches, you're going to be out of town. Let me know if you're going to be out of town and, I can watch out for you, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. So neighborhood watches have helped in the past. I think that, one, it promoted neighborly, right? That's what it promoted. It promoted neighborly. There was contacts, there were meetings, there was a ward or a neighborhood captain. I've been part of setting up neighborhood watches in the past, and they certainly have their place because it unifies the neighborhood, or at least individuals within a neighborhood. I think it's harder now to do. I think a lot of times people, one, just don't have the time. One, we talk about the COVID-19 and the social distancing and the masks, and that really has set us back as an agency, certainly with the community interaction, but even as a community, right? People initially, when it first happened and everyone was told to stay home, you couldn't find a car on Broadway in the morning. Like there was nobody, there was no traffic, there was no one walking. Things have normalized, thankfully, after that. But I think the Neighborhood Watch has a piece or a component to that. I think in the past, many of you have had ward meetings. I think that has also gone a long way as well. As always, I open myself up to any type of schedule you can put together. Let me know in advance and I'll be there. And just more so as a reassurance. I know our information's out there. People know how to get a hold of us. I get all that. But just as a reassurance that we do, as an agency, care and really work for this community. And it's difficult. Law enforcement right now has been painted with a broad brush across this country. The men and women that serve this community, the Kingston Police and the surrounding communities with the sheriff, the town of Ulster, the state police, are all painted with that same brush. And it is difficult when you get to the door and you say, I'm here to help you. There are people that don't believe you or have seen a video that they're like, yeah, we really don't want you here. And it's a difficult position for a police officer, especially a younger one that may be new to this community or not as well suited in responding to that, thinking, well, I don't understand why that just happened. I'm a good guy. I'm here to help you, right? And so we've run into those situations as well. And I think, let's face it, there's a lot of community unrest, and it affects everything we do anymore. It really does. There are individuals out there that are radical left and radical right, and they clash at every opportunity. For every person on Facebook that says yes, there's a person on Facebook that says no. And I think that's part of it. So I think the Neighborhood Watch program is something good. I think it does have a lot of merit. I'm not sure at this time if it's something that could be implemented at its fullest, but there's no reason why you as individuals couldn't hold, if you have the emails or the phone numbers, hold individual ward meetings, even through Zoom or GoToMeeting to do that. So, good old fashioned door to door doesn't hurt if just to kind of put their minds at ease. And that's something we have talked about doing, again, at the city level to try to make that happen.
Rainey, Alderman Scott Childers, do you have any hand up?
No.
Chief, just one other thing, out in the streets, people approach me and whatever, and I want to see how you answer this, if you can answer this, that, the chief, he's handcuffing his officers. What do you say to that? Are you telling your officers to get out on those beats and do what you have to do to solve these crimes?
So when you say
you have their back no matter what.
So when you say do what you have to do, what does that mean? Because I hear that as well, Tony, right? When you say, tell the cops do what they got to do, what does that mean, right? Because if you go back 30 years ago, do what you have to do has a whole different meaning than do what you got.
Yeah.
So the one thing we've always said is to every officer is make sure your camera's on. Make sure the community knows who you are. Whether it's, hey, I'm Officer Joe, or hey, I'm Jid. What can I do for you? The right to know has gone a long way. The ability to record our actions, our interactions with the community has gone a long way, both from the transparency component and the accountability component. As far as handcuffing, I think you use that term, right? That the chief handcuffed us. I'm not really sure where that's coming from, right? If you're hearing that, at what point was there anything publicly or internally that I've said that would give that impression? I've always said to the officers, some of the guidelines that the community expects us to follow have changed. We are expected to have that camera on at all times. We are expected to be professional at all times. We are expected to have an understanding, to de-escalate, to use the proper level of force when necessary. You know, we invest as a city department, we invest heavily in our officers. We're looking at, for new ones, 25-year career, right? That's their retirement level. So 25 years, you know, hopefully they stay for that 25 years. They become part of what's going on in this community. They're reading the headlines, they know, but internally, that's up to that individual officer to determine whether or not I'm going to stop the cars. And when you say, does the chief have their back? You know, how can you not have their back? But here's the question, like you would anything else. Are they doing the right thing out there? Right? You have to ask yourself, you know, if you have children and they go out there and your child messes up, do you have their back? Absolutely. You'll support them in every way. But at some point, there's personal accountability for that child's actions, right? And listen, my kids are held to a high standard within our household, as expected, as it should be. So our officers, we train them, we equip them, and then we expect them to go out to do the job. There are those that are very proactive, and there are those that are not. Like every other profession out there. There are officers that come in, they do their 8 hours, they respond to calls. There's other officers that get out of their cars without having to be told. I was driving up Chandler Drive the other day, or Canaan Boulevard, leaving work, and I saw one of the KPD guards pulled off to the median doing radar. Now, again, as far as I know, there's no memo for me saying do radar, but this officer and the supervisor, accompanying supervisor, said, listen, get out there. If we need you for a call, go do it. But there's a traffic safety issue that we have to watch, and it's obviously related to speed. So I think a lot of that is based upon the officers being trained properly so that they make the right decisions. 2, having the equipment so that they know they can do the job when they're out there. And 3, as far as having their back, yes, I have their back, but they have to have those other 2 components in place. If an officer does not do as they're trained to do, or does not use the equipment properly, then they do have to be held to a discipline standard. And no one can fault anyone, myself, the mayor, the council, anyone for that. That is where we are. And that's the expectation. Communities across the country have come to expect a lot from our police forces. We recognize that, and that's why we invest so heavily in them.
Thank you, Chief. Anybody else? No other hands? Alrighty, Chief, I appreciate you taking the time, time to come here and address, the issues that are going on in the city, and hopefully you'll be able to come back as needed to update what's going on. I know you can't, speak about the ongoing investigations, and I know a lot of people out in the community thinking that, oh, the police should just tell us, oh, they're doing this and that, but that hinders your detectives, whatever, from doing their job. And we trust that you guys know what you're doing and that you're doing your job. And hopefully we'll have some more arrests for these shootings that are going on here, and and make this community safe, continue to be safe. So I appreciate you stopping and talking to us. Anytime
you need me, all of you, I believe, have my phone number. Text me if you have to have something right away. I'm usually pretty good about getting back to you right away. Usually after 11 o'clock at night, it might take me a little while to recognize the ding on it, but I appreciate the support. I fully recognize that the council is behind us. I am going to be asking for money, so let's just keep that in mind, that's going to be coming your way. But I really do appreciate the opportunity to discuss this. Right. I know it's a serious matter, and we are taking this.
Thank you again, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Alderman O'Reilly, and Alderman Ventura Morel.
Goodbye, Chief. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Alderwoman, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Michelle.
Alderman Hirsch, thank you.
Alderman Scott Childress.
Well, I think we're ready to move to adjourn.
Right. Any other business? No? Can I have a motion to Alderman O'Reilly?
I will be quick. I have contacted the DPW, the head of our superintendent of public works, Ed Norman, and I asked him, how how's it going with the safety of our employees? And let me just read you one thing I don't think you'd mind me saying this over. He says, I am proud to say that none of the DPW staff have fallen ill during the pandemic, largely because the employees are doing their best to conform to the policies enacted. Hopefully we can keep the momentum going and get through these trying times safely, effectively, and most of all, healthy. So I've been asking as you know, I've been asking about employee safety on a regular basis. And Ed Norman has been keeping me up to date. And I just want to let you all know that they're doing everything they can, with what they have, and keeping up to date. And it's a very difficult job, but the employees in Kingston are doing an amazing job. And I just wanted to let you guys know that. And then I'm keeping up on it, and I'm trying to keep everybody up to date on it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alderman O'Reilly, for keeping us up to date. And I'm glad to hear from Supervisor and DPW Supervisor Ed that there's nobody come to any sickness from this coronavirus. So that's great. Anybody else? Can I have a motion to adjourn? Ventura Morel, motion, and Alderwoman Hirsch, second. All in favor? Good. Everybody's in favor. Anybody opposed? All right.